Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining my Dr. Lorre Law's community, which is really a Haelan Nurse Community, a safe and supportive space for all nurses and people who are experiencing some form of burnout or traumatization. And for nurses, oftentimes the traumatization that we're experiencing is due to avoidable factors, such as the broken healthcare system, toxic workplaces, or downright difficult patients, families, colleagues, coworkers, leadership, and the list goes on. So over the course of our time together, it's my intention to bring you all the love, the support, and importantly, resources and strategies for you to insulate yourself from the harsh working conditions that all nurses are facing right now, so that you can move out of surviving in practice to thriving in practice. Because, well, we all know not any one of us can fix the system. I've been around since now I'm dating myself. If the camera hasn't already dated me, let me go ahead and date myself. I have been around in nursing since the 1970s, mid to late 70s. I got my start first cleaning toilets, actually, in a skilled nursing facility. And then when I turned 15, I was eligible to do my CNA, my certified nursing assistant, and that's how I put myself through high school and college. And I've been taking care of people ever since, all the way through until now, where I'm a professor at the university, where I teach in an integrative nursing practice program. Oops. So anyway, what I wanted to talk with you about is that a lot of nurses that I work with in my integrative nurse coaching practice is that nurses come to me with all sorts of challenges. And usually what they come to see me for isn't really the root cause. And as I started exploring this with my clients, I started to realize there was so much more to the burnout story than met the eye. And that got me as a nurse scientist, right? I mean, I love to ask questions and spend lots and lots and lots of time in the evidence base. So there's my geek flag. It's going up right now as we speak. But I was working with nurses prior to the pandemic and was really leaning into the fact that there's so much more going on here. It's not just burnout. And the typical definitions of burnout are as though it's restricted just to the workplace. Well, I'm a whole human being. I and all nurses, we're whole people. We don't just separate ourselves and take one part of ourselves to work and the other part of us stays at home. And so when we talk about burnout, it's really a multi-system syndrome that affects millions and millions, and there's more to it. It's not just burnout in the vast majority of times. So that got me really asking some big research questions. And I was looking at all of this, and then the pandemic hit. And oh my gosh, it was like having a front row seat into the worst that nurses have ever experienced. And it broke my heart. But it was also, I knew it was a tremendous opportunity to really study what in a very deep and intimate way through all the social media outlets and video channels, right? That people were posting so transparently about what they were experiencing. So that's gold for a scientist, for a researcher. I'm a qualitative researcher. So this was like so rich and so moving. And so I, like everyone else, I watched the Tiger King series and I baked a lot of sourdough bread and did a lot of the pandemic pastimes, right, when we were going through that process. And also, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work because I knew that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity to really study and examine and try and find a solution for burnout. But what I discovered is that burnout and nurse-specific traumatization, which I will unpack in future videos, are the symptoms when you really start deep diving into the literature in the way that I did. you find there's substantial overlap between the symptoms. And so what appears to be burnout on the exterior, right? And nurses are telling me, please stop telling me about burnout, stop telling me about resilience, and stop talking about self-care. Nurses are feeling gaslighted by the community, by their employers, by the healthcare organizations, and even by other nurses. So we have a much bigger problem than just burnout. What we have at the root cause in many, many cases is unintegrated trauma. And part of the reason for that is that nurses are among the high-risk professionals, right up there with military combat personnel, law enforcement, first responders, paramedics, firefighters. Nurses are right up there in the high-risk professions for trauma exposure. And yet, over 83% of nurses report insufficient resources and support. Well, not only insufficient and lacking, as in zero. We got nothing for the massive trauma exposure. So yes, we have trauma exposure in three different ways. We have as individuals, right? In our individual lives, we have all experienced hardships. Well, the AACN, which is the American Association College of Nurses, which is pretty prestigious organization that really guides nursing curriculum across the country here in the US, came out with a position statement that said that we as nurses should assume that everyone has been exposed to trauma and that everyone has been traumatized in some fashion, right? Well, nurses are a subset of that population. So we as humans, as individuals, we have a personal life and we may have been exposed to any number of traumas and hardships, some of which we may have fully integrated and healed through, some of which we may still be embodying in various degrees of healedness, right? And those come with us to work. We can't just I can't just take off my arm and leave it at home and go to work any more than I could take off the unintegrated trauma that I am embodying and not take it to work. And then we get over to our workplace and we have a lot of trauma exposure that is inherent. It's inherent to the nursing profession. It's part of what we do is we help and are with people in their most vulnerable states. And that is a big burden for us to carry. And that would, if that were all, the nurses would probably not be leaving the profession in mass exodus format, right? So what is also on top of that, so here we have it's kind of layered. So we have here the trauma that we as individuals, every human has been exposed to. Some of it is healed, some of it is in various degrees of healedness, and it's stored in the body. Then we have the trauma exposure that is inherent with nursing. It comes with the job just like the other high-risk professionals. Now here's the straw that starts to break the nurse's back. Then we have the healthcare system inadequacies, the short staffing, the lateral violence, the bullying, the not having resources, the system failures, right? We have near misses, sentinel events, adverse events that many times are secondary to these insufficient resources, right? This is all avoidable. And so it's like the trifecta of trauma exposure. And that is really what is at the core of burnout that nobody is talking about until now. Because, I mean, a few people are talking about it. And I do want to just acknowledge one of my colleagues, Dr. Karen Foley over at Purdue, who came out with a middle range theory for nurse psychological trauma. And so now we have some theoretical framework on which to start carving out a solution. And so let us not necessarily call it burnout. Let us not talk about self-care. Nurses know how to take care of themselves. This is not the problem. This is perceived as gaslighting by Oh, I've talked to thousands of nurses. All are telling me the same thing. This is over, over my career. And so let us start calling it what it is. It looks like burnout on the outside to the uninformed eye, but when you start digging deep into the literature, I did research across 4 different disciplines. So, oh wait, hold on, there goes a few of my geek flags are flying up, right? And so when you really start unpeeling it and you start looking at this through the lens of polyvagal theory, which I will explain in more detail, you can really start to see it. And so that's why I spent the last 5 years coming up with an actionable framework, evidence-based, that all nurses can use to start insulating themselves and starting to navigate the healthcare system in a more healthy manner, because it's not going to fix itself. I mean, it's just not. I've been around for almost 50 years. Woo. And it just keeps getting worse. And we all know this. And I'm not calling anyone out. I'm just calling it as I see it and as I have lived it, and as all of you have seen and lived it. So I'm just so grateful that you are here, and I hope you'll continue to tune in. I have written an entire book. It's called Nursing Our Healer's Heart, a recovery guide for nurse trauma and burnout. So I hope if you haven't received your complimentary first chapter, please head over to my website at drlorrelaws.com. That's DRLORRELAWS.com. And jump on our list and get your free chapter if you don't already have it. And then please add me to your contact list so that these messages, these emails, these tips, these strategies, all the resources that I have for you, that they actually find their way to you. All right, so thank you so much for your time and attention. It's just my good pleasure to be of service in light and love to you, from my healer's heart to yours. And until next time, thank you for the important work that you're doing, and namaste.